Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Confronting COVID-19 virtual town hall series that the Dallas Regional Chamber is sponsoring these days. My name is Dale Petrosky, and I am privileged to be the CEO of the Dallas Regional Chamber. You know, it's been about 2 months since the pandemic dramatically altered the way we live, work, and do business. And much like so many of your companies, our team at the DRC has quickly reorganized ourselves to better serve our members and our community. We developed a robust communications plan, which includes this virtual town hall series. We dispatched a team of writers and editors who constantly shape new information for our website. We've recommitted ourselves to our mission to make Dallas the best place in America to live, work, and do business. And that's why we also immediately launched a website and a public service campaign to help workers who lost their jobs through no fault of their own find new jobs in industries that are actually hiring. Industries like the grocery stores, warehouses, pharmacies. Emmitt Smith, the great NFL Hall of Famer and Dallas Cowboy, is our spokesman for the campaign. You'll see him on TV and radio and on billboards. And so it's been a great campaign. The minute we announced Emmitt, the visits to our site went up 700%. So the power of celebrity, right? Every single member of our team is doing something different than they were doing 60 days ago. But that is all in service to being committed to our mission, to being a collaborative organization committed to leading the Dallas business community. So I'm going to have the privilege now of introducing our featured guest. Many of you have joined our previous town halls. We've had Senator Cornyn, we've had Congressman Allred, we've had the Littler Law Firm, we've had Ray Perryman, the great economist. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, we welcome you. Many of you are here for the second or third time. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is top of mind for everyone: return to the office space. And more broadly, what's the future of work look like? And to look deeper into that subject, we have three experts from Weber Shandwick, the global communications and marketing agency. And I'm going to talk just for a minute about today's format so you understand. Jennifer Cho and her colleagues Peter Duda and Anthea Hoyle will share some remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions. Jennifer will moderate the discussion. You can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to send your questions directly to our panelists. We'll wrap up about 1:45. So now it's my pleasure to get things started by introducing my friend Jennifer Cho. She serves as General Manager and Executive Vice President at Weber Shandwick Southwest, based here in Dallas. She's a proven business development and agency executive focused on providing strategic, organizational, and financial leadership to the region. She graduated from Columbia, and then she worked in the record industry. First time I knew that, Jennifer. She led the launch of Metro PCS, and in 2017, she brought her passion for data and analytics to the Weber Shandwick team, and they are lucky to have her. We are so grateful to you and your colleagues for joining us today, Jennifer. I'm going to turn things over to you.
Dale, thank you so much for this opportunity and for everything that you and your team are doing for the business community here in Dallas and for the great people here. I've felt informed, and I'm really loving the series that you've put together.
Thank you.
Allowing us to host one today.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So, hello, everyone. As Dale mentioned, my name is Jennifer Cho, and I'm excited to introduce my colleagues today. First, we have Peter Duda, who's the Executive Vice President and Management Supervisor here at Weber Shandwick. He also serves as the head of the agency's Global Crisis and Issues team. He's counsels clients across a wide variety of industries with strategy relating to high-profile litigation, government investigations, regulatory enforcement, corporate reorganizations, and restructurings. He's also provided strategic communications advice to domestic and international clients across a number of different industries that include financial services, food and beverage, infrastructure, manufacturing, technology, and of course, consumer products. Welcome, Peter. Thanks for joining us today. We also have Anthea Hoyle, who's an executive vice president at our consultancy, United Minds. Anthea is a continual improver, a seeker of better, and a believer in good. She helps our clients find useful, meaningful, and effective delivering on their business ambition in partnership with their own people. Before joining Weber Shandwick and United Minds, Anthea led Ogilvy's employee engagement specialty, where she partnered with colleagues to help clients with brand-led change. Through this lens, Anthea's clients successfully navigate cultural change, M&As and spins, process improvements, enhanced employee experiences, business transformations, and internal crises and shifts in leadership. Anthea has also counseled clients across a range of industries, and she's worked with include IBM, American Express, UPS, DuPont, IHG, Bayer, and Merck. Anthea graduated with honors for her BA in Business and Communication from the Queensland University of Technology in Australia, and was awarded one of only 2 scholarships provided by the Advertising Federation of Australia. Anthea, welcome. Okay, so now that we've had the introductions, we're going to let Peter and Anthea go through our presentation today. Look forward to more questions, so please do enter them in the chat.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. I guess the challenge we're all facing right now is that this equilibrium is our new reality. And we have to make determinations in what matters most and how we should act in an environment where we're dealing with constant change, new information, and having to make decisions when information is imperfect. And a lot of that we don't know, but we don't know yet, but we still have to move forward and still have to run an economy and run a society. But one thing we do know is that what we're facing right now is an urgent global crisis. Loss of life is heartbreaking. The social disruption and the unemployment and what is sent to our economy is hard to bear, and the economic impact. And we're all trying to, no matter whether we're in Texas or anywhere else in this country, we're trying to understand how do we get people back to work. Economy is the American economy is a force that is at the core of our society and drives the world economy. And how do we get back? When do we get back? What are the decisions we have to make? How do we do this at a time when in terms of COVID, we don't understand the full impact, and we're trying to make the right decisions that are right for employers, right for our people, right for our companies, and right for our customers. I mean, the one thing we do know is that our focus today is going to be is that employees are at the heart of this crisis. I'm going to talk a little bit in terms of some of our point of view, what we've been telling clients around the United States, around the world, in terms of as everyone's working to navigate. And we can't call it really a return to work, but actually a move forward into work. Is the one thing we do know. We're not going back to the workplace that we all left before stay-in-place orders were issued. It's a new reality that we're moving into, and one that we have to prepare for. Talk about some of the research we've done. These are based on national polls, talking to employees at major companies across the country. You can kind of see here. The good news is that overall, employees, employees of corporate America do see that their employees are a trusted source of information and believe that their employers have been acting in the right way. I think we all should be reassured is that people do believe in their management teams and believe in their companies and believe that employers put safety above profits and are taking care of workers and that their health and safety is going to be key. And even though we've seen, the employment situation has been dire, one thing that's been a constant for us, we have seen that overall employee sentiment towards employees has been very positive. And what that tells us is that employees will continue to look. They're getting a lot of different information from different sources, and it varies in the region where you are, what you're hearing from, both regionally and locally and nationally. But employers will remain, have been, and will remain a trusted source of information. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Just building upon that, I think we've seen that in great stats here in terms of, and I guess this shows here the more the communications that the employer has provided, the better sentiment that employees are having about where they're working. So I think the key takeaway, simple takeaway here is, at this time, as many folks know, communicating with your folks, whether you're a small organization or a large organization, you can't over communicate. I haven't seen any evidence of communication fatigue. And actually, to the contrary, the employers that, from our research, what we've seen is the employees that communicate most and tell it like it is and talk with empathy and give straight talk to their employees are the ones that the employees have the most loyalty to and best feelings about. At the same time, not a surprise here, employees are nervous. People are concerned about their companies, where they work, and about their own jobs. And everyone's cognizant of the fact that the impact that the coronavirus has had on their companies and the economy overall. Looking at the stats in terms of what is it going to take, and really to get our economy going and to get businesses going again, it's instilling confidence in our management teams and confidence in our employees. There is, and these are national polls. There's going to be some differences from region to region, I'm sure, but there's still a number. What we've seen is that a number of employees are still concerned about it going back too soon. People are very anxious to get back to work, but they also want to do it in a way that's safe for them and safe for their families. And some of the factors, people certainly are going to feel most confident when there's a vaccine and treatment. We all know that's months, if not years away. But a number of factors that people are looking at, but it's going back to that employees trust most the people they know best, the place where they work, and especially if they're getting a lot of communication, getting the right communication. It's really, we just have to be cognizant of the fact it's not irrational for people to be nervous about going back to work. It's just a big part of employers' job will be to instill confidence with their employees. Another important finding from some of the research we've done is that what we've seen talking to consumers in terms that are watching what companies are doing, 80%, and that's a huge number from the surveys we've done over the years, and we've certainly looked at company reputation and social impact and corporate social responsibility. But these numbers are huge in terms of people saying in terms of that they're looking at and will remember how have companies treated their employees, what's the perception of that, is going to have a huge impact on brand and long-term loyalty to those companies and brands. So what you're doing now, it doesn't just, from looking at these kind of numbers, is not just going to have short-term impact in terms of your brand's reputation, but it's something that we believe your consumers, your customers, it's an opportunity to build equity with them and cement what you already have, but also build further loyalty with them. And it's going to be a key component to how you treat employees is going to be a key component to what your brand is going to be like on the other side of this. So what we've seen working with companies, both the United States and around the world, I think we've really seen that, and especially in the United States, that companies have risen to the challenge. I mean, they've risen to the occasion. They've taken, people are trying to. It's a difficult balancing act in keeping companies going in terms of doing what's right for society. But I think what we've also seen is people are rising to the challenge of re-envisioning the future, because we can't go back, but we have an imperative that we absolutely must move forward. And the way we see this is, and we're going to talk about kind of that reset in terms of what is that new future going to look like, moving forward into the future, into the new workforce. There's 3 phases we've had. We've responded. We're going to reset in terms of getting people back to work, and then we're going to have to look at what do we need to reinvent? How are we going to do things differently? The world is, I think we all know that the world has changed, but I think we're all should be confident that we're going to change with it, that we're going to find solutions. It's just going to require, American business always rises to the occasion, rises to the challenge, and require more creativity, more ingenuity, and more innovation. I think those are kind of 3 pillars of American business already. I think we're just going to need to apply all those things on steroids to get this country going again and get our people back to work and do it in a way that's smart, that treats our people well, and then has their safety first and foremost. but at the same time, we're gonna have to go back, and we're gonna have to do that in a very careful and deliberate way. So in terms of the reset phase, so going back to work or going forward into work, let's take a closer look at that. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Anthea, who's going to present our point of view on considerations for that and how do we get the economy going back to where it needs to be in the right and thoughtful way.
Yes, thank you, Peter. We're going to take a closer look at that middle part of that circle, which is the reset phase, which is what we're all coming into now, and I know some of you are already entering that at the moment. So building on the research that Peter shared earlier and some of the insights, we're just going to share some considerations as we look at this next phase, which of course is going to be a lot different from the shutdown. The shutdown was pretty immediate, pretty rapid, and pretty consistent across many places. But as we think about all of these disrupted workplaces and what needs to happen in this next phase, two things are pretty clear. We're not going to return to workplaces as they were before, which Peter said. But now we actually have a little bit more time in some areas and in some ways. I know that Texas is a little bit ahead of other states, but with an abundance of patience and compassion, we have a bit more time to prepare, and we need to be thoughtful about how we do this now. So the first consideration is that the transition will be different for each community. Now, while this is a tale of two countries here, what this really points out is the difference between how South Korea versus the US actually responded. And what you can see in this is really just an indication of how something such as testing, which obviously is just one component of the overall picture, but when you have rapid testing available, just how much of a difference that makes. And so that's just one element of the public health infrastructure. There's other elements to consider. But what this really points out is how drastically different outcomes can be depending upon what infrastructure you have in place. And so that's why we're saying each community will be different, not even just every country, but every state, every city, and even areas within cities. So it definitely needs to be something that you tailor based on where you are and how you operate. And a lot of things that we're hearing from many organizations is, well, what can we actually expect in the next 90 days or so? And so, again, it depends on where you are in the country and what the outbreak looked like for you and what stage you are at in the moment. But roughly speaking, there are some things that will be dictated by the virus. We can't actually put a calendar against this. The virus will largely dictate how time plays out. And until we have things in place such as rapid testing available to everyone, or we have a vaccine or we have other treatments in place, really the next 90 days is going to be more of the same, with the most effective measures being the things we're already doing. Following that, once we have more testing and we have treatments that are actually working, we can sort of consider that phase as a little bit of a delicate balance. And then once we have a vaccine, again, it depends on how widely it can be manufactured and how quickly and who gets it when, but that's when we look at, what we consider a whole new normal. So this next phase is really going to be a bit of an ambiguous period of limbo between the unexpected shutdown and where we'll end up in the new normal. So as we think about this, we need to think about segmenting and staggering workforces, and some of you may have already been doing this recently. But what we really recommend here is, because it looks so differently based on where you are and based on who you have and what your workplace looks like, really consider the latest public health information that you have on hand, because that's really going to be, as Peter said from the data, employees are looking to that as the trusted source, but it's also the really good guidance in terms of how you're going to be keeping your people safe and keeping customers safe and other stakeholders safe. So that really will drive your reopening strategy. And then you also need to be thinking about providing that sense of visible leadership, both for your people, but also for your community, and really giving that sense of reassurance with empathy and confidence, being clear and consistent and simple in how you communicate your decisions. So what we have here is a tool that we've been using with some organizations just to help them think through all of the information that they need to consider as they reopen workplaces. The left-hand side is pretty straightforward if your government authority has extended a shutdown, and we know that's not the case necessarily at the moment. So on the right-hand side, looking at the considerations that still need to be made. So obviously, following guidance, we've got some guidance from from the White House in terms of how, places need to reopen, but there's also some local guidance from governments. But on top of that, we're really saying to organizations that there are additional decisions that you need to make. You don't have to reopen just because your governor says you do. Of course, there are certain organizations that are really needing to get back to work, and the idea of essential workers and extending that layer a little bit further to really ensure that people have a strong economy and that we're also meeting the needs of people in the communities. But it's a delicate balance, of course, and really considering how do we think about essential versus non-essential and widening that tier, but then also looking at who's sort of more higher risk and lower risk. So really thinking about those two axes and those two considerations. And as you look at the right-hand side here in this green box, for those that, for those employees that in your organization you think are more essential and lower risk, definitely thinking about safe ways to bring them back. And also thinking through additionally, what do you need to have in place before you actually do that? What additional protective measures? What about additional support? A lot of employees may be feeling a bit anxious about coming back. We've been talking to a lot of experts around this sense of anxiety, and that it's an absolutely normal reaction to this very abnormal situation that we tend to be in. So really reassuring and addressing that first and foremost, and making sure that we're helping our leaders and managers to instill that confidence and bring people back. And here's just one example from Jane Fraser at Citi, who actually went out there, and you may have seen this, but essentially just saying, obviously it's a global organization and they've got businesses and branches and customers and employees all over. But they made a point of saying that, they will continue to prioritize the safety of employees, customers, and communities. And that may mean being more cautious than the guidance of the city, state, or country. So basically just saying that they will take into consideration, of course, all of the good information that's out there, but that they're also going to just put on their own layer of decision making on top of that, and thinking about what, in accordance with their values and who they are, what makes sense for their business. Another consideration, and this is something that everyone across the US and across the world is keeping in mind, is that being open doesn't necessarily mean staying open. So this is going to be that difficult dance over the next few months as you reopen something, but possibly, there's a second wave, or a hotspot starts opening up again, or someone in your office tests positive, and then you really need to be able to respond quickly and reassure people and not create additional anxiety around that. So highlighted here is just a snapshot from Starbucks, where they're taking this very sort of monitor and adapt approach, really pointing out that they're taking lessons from overseas, things that they've experienced in, say, China, and applying that and taking that community by community approach, and really making sure that when they do reopen, that they're keeping an eye on things and that they know how to quickly react if they need to, and making sure that they have got contingency plans in place and communicating both with their employees and customers appropriately. And embracing new ways of working. So again, as we think about, segmenting your workforce and staggering who comes back when, there's going to be new ways of working that you implemented as the rapid shutdown happened, but also over the next few months. And so what's really going to be necessary is really having this adaptive, flexible way of working, and being very accommodating towards this ongoing tension between people's personal and professional needs. Some of the things that were put into place at shutdown may have been quick Band-Aid ways of working that may need to be reassessed, and some companies are rethinking whether their technology platforms that they currently have are sufficient enough. And as this hybrid sort of remote/physical way of working, within companies continues over the next few months, thinking about, well, what are some of the habits that we think are really good? What do we need to adopt longer term? What are some policies and practices that no longer serve us and we might need to implement others? So it's really being very mindful and cultivating the ways of working that make sense for you and your people in this new era, where some might be going back physically, half of your workforce perhaps, or in different shifts, but then how do you also make sure that everyone feels united as one company still, and has this standard expectation of work? And importantly, this has been a crisis like no other, as many people have said many times. And so this is something where we're really going to need to help our people build resilience. And so we're going to need to lead with compassion. And we're also needing to build resilience, not just within individuals, but also in our infrastructures and our systems and our organizations. So making sure that we are first and foremost acknowledging and addressing employee concerns, validating those and listening to them and finding ways to work around them. As Peter pointed out in the research, not only is it something that many employees are seeking of their organizations, it's also something that consumers are expecting. So it's really important to make sure that that's happening. Continuing to refer to trusted sources is going to go a long way to ensure that people feel that they can trust what you're asking them to do, and that you're demonstrating your organization's values front and center, both in terms of how you make decisions, how you act, but then also how you communicate. And making sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion don't fall by the wayside, or that there are unintended consequences by some of these abrupt new changes or accelerated ways of working. And really being mindful of longer term measures. There's a lot of things put in place very quickly, such as extended sick leave or other benefits were changed. And I think organizations really need to be thinking about whether some of those should be adopted in more longer term measures, or what might need to be adapted to make them more extendable. And really having these feedback loops, again, making sure you're listening to your people. Because really, if you don't know what they're thinking and feeling, you might be addressing their concerns in ways that you don't need to, or you might be missing certain points where they really do need your reassurance or support. And what we found from working with organizations, and also our own research touched on before, 5 key drivers for instilling this confidence in employees is, simply, does the infrastructure around their workplace feel safe and supportive? Are schools open? Transport seems reliable and safe, that sort of thing. Second of all, they need to believe that their organization is putting their health ahead of commercial interest. And we touched on that in our data earlier. They need to see the organization is implementing new measures that are the latest thinking in terms of public health from trusted sources. And number 4 is they need to feel supported by their leaders. They need to feel that their concerns are validated. They need to feel supported in that this is a delicate dance of coming back, and that it's not just going to be, switch on the lights and everyone returns and everyone's expected to be okay. So people do still need to feel that it's okay if they need to take leave, and that we're encouraging people who aren't well to stay home. And number 5, people really need to still feel connected to the company and proud of the work that they're doing. So reinforcing your purpose, or inspiring people why your company is doing what it's doing. And I touched on earlier that leaders are really going to be having a big role in terms of helping employees to come back. So helping your leaders to feel that sense of confidence starts with understanding that they're people too, and that they need your help as well to equip them to address some of their own concerns. Others. So we've been working to develop this series of trainings for leaders and managers that focuses on, managing yourself, managing your team, and also managing the business, because obviously this is also becoming quite an economic crisis as well. And having managers being able to, adapt to these 3 different areas will really help your teams and your people to feel supported in ways that's, bridging the personal and the professional, as well as productivity for the business. And Peter touched on this as well, but the number 6 is don't just recover, reinvent. So this is an opportunity for us as organizations, as leaders, and as employees to reflect on lessons learned and consider how our actions have changed our culture of the organization, for good or for worse. What do we need to keep? What do we need to change? And beyond culture, there's also operational considerations. So whatever we set out to do at the start of 2020, is that still relevant now, given the changes that have happened? And do we need to reset our priorities, our scorecards, our funding and our resources? Do we need to reallocate those in some way? We also need to rethink past practices and extend measures that consider the interests of both the people in your business and the people around your business, so that together you can create more of a resilient and sustainable business going forward. So some quick final thoughts, just to sort of wrap up what we touched on, was, you can really, some quick things you can start to do is, if you're not already doing this, survey your employees, understand their sentiment, understand their mindsets, and how you can support them. Constantly communicate. Peter touched on that in the findings, is that communication really does matter, and it really does drive trust among employees. But also live your purpose and values. Obviously, that's extremely important to your people, but also your consumers and clients outside of your organization. Double down on contingency planning, especially in this ambiguous phase of months long until we have a vaccine. When we open and have to close and reopen, it's really going to be a careful consideration as we think about all of the risks and communication around that. And finally, of course, follow the guidance of trusted scientific sources. The science is really going to help reassure employees first and foremost, but also it's going to help make sure that we're not forgetting any important measures on how we keep our businesses and our communities safe. And we have a couple of references that you can draw upon that covers these topics that we covered on here, so we can share these with you as well afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anthea and Peter. Really appreciate all of that great information we have a couple questions coming in. So the first one, you recommend following the guidance of trusted scientific sources. Are there any in particular that you would highlight or recommend?
I can jump in on that one. So I think the CDC and the World Health Organization are two sources. In our findings, employees reference the CDC and Dr. Fauci as the top two sources that they would trust.
Awesome. The next question is really just about sharing content. So we'll be sure to empower the chamber to send out a recap email that has the resources that we referenced in the deck, as well as some additional content. So we're happy to share that. You guys covered everything in recovery planning. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question, if you don't mind, if I could ask it.
Sure, of course.
When you're talking to companies, what do you think their biggest anxiety is?
I think I'll jump in on this one, Anthea. I think in decisions that we're making and things a couple of things that I wouldn't have. I think there are a couple of anxieties that companies have, and I really, from the ones I've talked to and speaking for our own company, is how do we keep people employed, right? How do we reduce the number of layoffs and furloughs? I mean, that's key first and foremost with everyone, every company, every client that I've talked to. And how do we get back to work? We need to get back to work. The economy's got to function, but how do we do in a way that's right by our people? How do we do in a way that's safe? And how do we do in a way that's actually sustainable? I think these are pretty, when I think as Americans, we all should be proud that I haven't heard almost every client that I've talked to are thinking about things the right way, thinking about their people, what's right for them. And I think everyone realizes we're all in this together, and we're going to get through it together. We're going to come out of it together. And people really are thinking of, companies are really thinking about and are concerned about doing things the right way.
I think that, Peter, that's from the employer-employee viewpoint, but there's also the part of the equation, which is customer. When will the American people feel confident enough, safe enough to be out and about, spending money, being around other people, and so forth? Because until that gets solved, businesses are not going to do very well.
Yeah, and I think that's, as true for employees and true for customers, it's building that confidence. I think we've, across the United States, across the world, we've been focusing on flattening the curve and making sure that the pandemic doesn't crash our healthcare system. And I think the next challenge is getting people to re-engage in, when will people have the confidence to re-engage in commerce and re-engage as customers, not only just as and as active consumers, and how are they going to engage when there's so much uncertainty? And the reality, look, none of this is irrational. It's for people to be anxious and concerned and cautious is very, very normal. It's rational. But I think for us, what we have to keep as businesses, we want our consumers engaged with us. But right now, we're doing pretty well with corporate America is doing well with consumers, and people are to a large extent trusting, approving of the way we've handled it. But it's a long game, so I think we're going to have to look at that as like in long-term reputation and for customer relationships. It's all about credibility. So the danger of getting out there, getting ahead of our skis, getting out there and promising more than we can deliver from either, from a safety and appropriateness point of view. The danger of that is that the next time, if we do have to retreat, and the next time we come forward, we're going to have even less confidence. People are going to believe in us less. So that's, I wish I had an easy answer or formula for that. All I have is, but these are considerations, and we're going to have, same time, we're going to have to make decisions with imperfect information. There's no easy answer for that. I think doing things with feeling that we have the science to the extent we understand it behind us, that we're doing it in the safest way possible, and encouraging people to re-engage. And I think you'll see here in Texas, as you reopen the economy, if we don't have spikes, if the healthcare system doesn't get crashed, confidence will grow, and more engage, and consumer engagement will continue. If the opposite happens, we're going to have to take some steps back. Right? We just have to be nimble and flexible through all of them. Anthony, anything you wanted to add, or Jennifer?
I think that's important, and you did mention kind of some data to look for as we make these difficult decisions. Another question that we're seeing is, with fear and the uncertainty, how would you guide companies that don't have feedback loops on this level already in existence? Is there any guidance there to make sure that business leaders are capturing that feedback in real time?
I'm sorry, Jennifer, that don't have the companies that don't have the
kind of like a feedback loop place. Like, is there kind of a recommended process to gather this feedback to balance the data that you're seeing, and then also being respectful of the specific concerns of the people in your office?
Anthony, you want to take?
Sure. Yeah. So if you don't have a feedback loop in place but would like to get a sentiment, you can do a quick poll. You can use something like SurveyMonkey if you don't have a survey platform in place, and just pull some questions together. If you need to, you can look at some of the stuff that we shared in this deck earlier around some of the considerations and concerns, and maybe structure some questions around that. But essentially, if you can't get a sort of a digital poll out there like a survey, then pull together some focus groups with employees. That's a good representation across your business, so you can really understand what their concerns are. And the goal is really to be able to give them a chance to air their concerns and feel listened to, but B, really understand what measures are going to make them feel safe and reassured to come back, so that you can make sure you're meeting those. So either way, whether it's sort of quickly just like through discussions or a survey, either way would be great just to get that.
Yeah, that's great. And the only thing I would add to that, there's no substitute for, if you're a big company, getting your managers, or if you're a smaller company, you're doing it yourself, reaching out to your people and say, how's it going? Look, how you feel and what's going on, how the kids doing, and because a lot of this is the way, when people feel that we're looking at them as a whole person and understand where they're coming from, what they're dealing with, they remember that, they're going to be more loyal to us, and they're going to be more productive. So the simple, some of this sounds like advanced common sense and stuff we should have learned in kindergarten, but a lot of stuff we learned in kindergarten that still applies today, I think.
It does apply today. Question about any additional technology that you guys have that you think is in the conversation, whether it's testing or just confirmation of, there's a ton of technology that's being talked about in New York right now. Is there anything interesting that you'd like to share with this group?
I think the challenge is the technology we have right now is imperfect. I think a lot of what's important, it's just the reality is we don't really have a reliable, tests to demonstrate whether people are immune or have developed antibodies. We don't have, and we're quickly building capacity for testing overall, but we're still not where we quite need to be. But I think what's important, given what we have, whatever technology we have, it's just kind of rudimentary right now, which is taking temperatures and keeping things clean and enforcing behavioral changes like social distancing. We're here with the technology we have, not with the technology we want. So use it, explain why we're doing it, make sure people always understand, your employees understand we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. And as new resources come online, we're going to apply those because our people are important, our customers are important, and we're always going to be doing the right thing to keep people safe and healthy. You know, and we're going to have to remain nimble, and things are going to change. And I don't think anybody thinks we have everything we want right now, but it is what it is, and we got to move forward with what we have.
That's exactly right. Speaking about working with what we already have, do you have any guidance for leaders of organizations where remote work has transitioned successfully? So if you're at the same productivity levels, is there a different kind of guidance for organizations like that?
Sure, I can jump in. So I would say that the guidance, and again, this is something that each organization will have to decide for themselves, but if either your entire workforce or a large portion of your workforce is successfully working remotely, you know, look to your region, your community, et cetera, to figure out whether it makes sense to bring them on public transport and have them out on, you know, crowding streets, crowding buildings, et cetera, or whether you should actually continue having them work from home for a period of time while you allow other types of workers to be able to come back and take up that space. We've heard from some clients who are actually even rethinking, will they actually change their work from home policies going forward? They're starting to actually, as part of their listening and feedback loops, starting to try and understand, is this something that they want employees to have more of long term, and be able to have the choice of when they come in and work more remotely more often. So I think it's something you should definitely consider. And this is part of that stage where we said, you know, don't just recover, but reinvent. So, you know, start considering, is this something that you think your organization wants to embrace more of going forward? And what makes sense for you and your people in terms of that flexibility around, you know, remote working, and when and how should they come into the office?
Yeah, I think remote work it's been, to a certain extent, for some organizations, not all, more of a perk or a privilege as opposed to a way of life. And I think that certainly has changed. So we've seen in markets that have come back online. We've been, you know, in constant contact, as you would imagine, with our offices in China, and they're doing, you know, people are coming back to the office in shifts just because there's only so much real estate and we have to space people out, and everybody's working from home on Friday. So so it's, I think working from home is certainly going to be part of the new normal.
I definitely agree there, as we all sit in our home office areas. I know we've had some conversations at Weber about this. Are you guys seeing any happening with nonprofits and corporations in more into their kind of CSR capability work?
I think we've certainly seen what I've seen a lot with is for Weber Shandwick. You know, Anthony and I work on, you know, an employee engagement and issues management and corporate reputation, but a lot of our work is we represent many of the world's and the country's leading marketers. But we've certainly seen companies where they've had marketing dollars allocated for events that just would have been tone deaf or counterproductive in the current environment, to reapply that towards corporate responsibility initiatives. You know, providing, you know, everything from, and a lot of it's been focused on healthcare and first responders and the people who are on the front lines. So I think we've certainly seen a lot of creative thinking in terms of, you know, and part of it was okay, this is good for our brand and good for our reputation and overall image. But a lot of it was, you know, we have this budget. What can we do with it, and how can we actually influence things for the good using this? So we've certainly seen, and I think that's the main difference I've seen in terms of that. And I think, look, in terms of how do we think about social impact, social responsibility, the acute focus and the painstaking efforts that companies are making and decisions they're making to mitigate unemployment, to keep people employed, you know, it's been a painful process and sometimes necessary to lay people off or to put people on furlough, but I think keeping people employed is also an important social impact and something for the overall good that I think clients all over the country have been very acutely focused on.
Definitely, and I know you referenced that in your today, just the long-term memory that people will have about how employers react. Speaking of companies and innovation, specific innovations that are happening specifically in the travel and tourism industry of note?
I think people are still trying, there's a lot they're trying to figure out in terms of how to make people confident in traveling again. I mean, we work for leading brands and, you know, in air travel, in major hotel clients, and in cruise lines, and everyone's right now trying. I think we're trying to get to the point right now. I think the focus is on what are we doing to make sure that our customers and our employees feel safe to re-engage in travel, what it's going to take, how we're going to do it, and how does that environment look different, and how's it changed, and how will behaviors change both from an employee and customer perspective as we navigate through this through the pandemic episode.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the content and the advice that you shared. So thank you.
Well, what a great conversation. Thank you so much. That was a terrific service to our DRC members. I learned so much. I take a lot of notes during these things, and I underlined 4 things. Peter said 2 of them, and Anthea said 2 of them. Peter said, we don't have perfect information, yet we have to keep moving forward without all the facts as an individual, as a company, and as a society. I mean, this disequilibrium that he talked about, right? And then he said, you can't over communicate. We believe that totally. And I thought that really resonated with me. Anthea said, visible leadership, communication that's transparent, clear, and consistent. And then she said, being open doesn't mean staying open. I mean, that's this ambiguity that we're going to live with for a while here. So unfortunately, everybody wants certainty in their lives. We're not going to have a lot of certainty for a while. And I think that came through loud and clear. So Jennifer, Peter, Anthea, thank you so much. That was a real service to our DRC members. Before we adjourn, I just want to highlight, we have a great website that's got fresh information every day. Please go to it and take all the information you want and use it, because it's in practical and usable form. It's best practices. It's what great companies are doing. It's what the governor said, the mayor said, the county judge said, everything you need to kind of navigate this crisis. We really encourage you to do that. So with that, Jennifer, again, thank you. And we so appreciate your bringing your expertise to our members today. Hope you all stay safe and have a great rest of the day.